Hi, everyone. I'm Jeanette Mulvey, the Editor-in-Chief of Co. by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I'm excited to welcome you to our third edition of Co Strategy Studio. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Dell, FedEx, Iron Mountain, and Oracle NetSuite. We appreciate your partnership in this series. So today's event is focused on how small businesses can navigate what can be a very complex but rewarding process of doing business with larger corporations. We will hear from two experts who will share their experiences, advice, and best practices for building strong partnerships with big businesses. Our first guest is a small business owner who has found success partnering with big companies to grow her product and her brand. And she has a great story. So let's get started. Now I'd like to introduce Katy Luxem. She's the founder and CEO of Big Dill Pickleball Company, a pickleball company based in Utah. We got to start over. I'm starting over. Sorry. Katy, did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Yep, that's right.
All right, you guys, we're going to start again. Now I'd like to introduce Katy Luxem, the founder and CEO of Big Dill Pickleball Company based in Utah. Katy previously worked at Amazon in the US and in the UK and was an e-commerce consultant. Welcome, Katy.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so tell us about Big Dill Pickleball. What do you guys do? And tell us a little bit how you got into that.
Yeah, so Big Dill Pickleball Company is really focused on, it's a paddle and gear company, and we're really focused on the beginner and intermediate player. And we are on Amazon First Business. So my experience is with Amazon and e-commerce. I started at corporate Amazon in 2007. It was a very different place back then. And I worked in shoes and apparel in Seattle. And then I moved to London to help launch and grow shoes and apparel over there. And in 2011, I moved back to the US and started consulting and working for a variety of e-commerce businesses, large companies like Rubbermaid and Honeywell, and then smaller startups as well. So I learned a lot about what not to do on Amazon and how to fail, frankly. So even those larger corporations have trouble working with the sheer size and complexities of Amazon. And then, yeah, during the pandemic, I started playing a lot of pickleball and thought, this would be a good time to launch my own business. And pickleball was where it was at.
I love that you come to us as both a small business owner who is selling to a big company, but also as a person who has a lot of experience navigating bigger companies in a variety of ways. So I think you're really bringing us valuable advice from both sides. So I guess the simplest question I have for you is, what is your advice for someone who is looking to either sell through a big retailer or a big platform, or to partner with them in some other way as a supplier or a business partner?
Yeah, I think the main things is that these days the competition is really fierce in any industry or field you're in, whether you're, product business or SaaS or even a restaurant or trade or anything. You really need to be clear about your differentiation points and have a strong sense of your brand. So what sets you apart from the other, 1,200 or 100,000 businesses doing the same thing in the same niche? And have you done the research to ensure that there is a gap you can fill and a product market fit? I think don't start working with, Amazon or Walmart or other large companies unless you're really solid on that. And then I think secondly, you really need to cover the basics before jumping into partnering with a large firm. So this just means having all your ducks in a row in terms of, incorporation and licensing and regulatory and tax info, and then also like logos, branding, taglines, everything like that. There are a lot of hurdles with bureaucracy and compliance just in a day-to-day sense with working with those large companies. So you don't want to waste time and resources if you start with sort of a half-baked idea or product.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Can you get a little bit more specific about the challenges that small businesses, especially like during your consulting time, I'm sure you saw this, but some of the challenges that small businesses face and the mistakes they make when they attempt to partner with a larger organization, particularly if they're not really fully prepared?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is just not thinking through all of the logistics for long-term growth or success. For example, I saw a lot of companies launch a product like a supplement without realizing that Amazon will require you to remove items that expire at regular intervals or something like that. There's also just like logistics things, lots of problems with, leaking packages for liquids, electronics labeling, regulatory things like that. And again, I think this just really comes back to understanding the product and industry you're working in, and then all of the regulation and kind of, those basic things that you need to do, plus the costs that come with managing that.
What do you think are the key factors that a company should be looking at when they're deciding if partnering with a bigger company is worth the investment, the time, the resources, the money? What's that equation look like when you're trying to figure that out for your company?
I'd say absolutely the biggest factor is just your bottom line. Can you be profitable while working with this partnership long term? For example, on Amazon, fees are about 30% of each sale, and storage fees also, go up every Q4. There's little details like that that I've definitely seen clients not fully account for. And in any industry, you just want to make sure you're fully accounting for all the costs of doing business with that larger partner. Another sense is that long-term piece. Like, does it make sense long-term? And do you have the resources, or would you need resources to augment your business in order to be successful? As a real life example, like Costco approached us, but for us, brick and mortar would come with a lot of hurdles that we currently can't handle in-house, like, different packaging and palletizing and order minimums and cadence. So that would obviously require us to hire someone. So it's not even pure like cost of goods or cost of the basic thing. It's sort of those additional resources that you may need to handle that partnership.
I think that's really interesting and things that I wouldn't have even thought of actually. When you partner with a big company, they have all kinds of standards and requirements of that they things they require of their partner. So how does a business prepare for that? I do they vary across the board? Are they kind of standard? How would you prepare your business for that if you weren't yet in a relationship with a particular company?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to do a lot of research. Oftentimes, like on Amazon, you can create your seller account before you even list anything. And Amazon, for example, has very detailed, like up to date articles on everything for seller, vendor platforms. You can use their calculators and know exactly what it will cost to store a product of your size and weight, exactly what regulatory requirements or restrictions your product category has. And then also in general, I think just being sure you own your intellectual property, especially for a product business, but also for other things. You want to make sure you have like those trademarks processing. And on Amazon, for example, you can't unlock a lot of the brand ownership benefits until that's done. So I think just kind of going through and reading those like startup, what do I need to do? What are the FAQs? And then for your particular product and business. I think you should also just be friends with Google. There's a lot of blogs and forums, and I've watched a lot of YouTube videos that are just out there for free that can help you understand requirements and work through problems when they do arise. And so problems will arise. So definitely plan for that. And then I think the last thing is just really keep calm when those problems do arise. Lots of larger companies rely on automation for support and dispute resolution. So again, try Google first and find out what you need to do before firing off that email or ticket or whatever. Oftentimes it's just the way you present your case and oftentimes the words you use that will trigger a variety of different responses. So just being really attentive to that side of things.
I think that's really great advice, no matter what kind of business relationship you're having, right? It's partly just about how you approach people. But speaking of people, you this is a situation a lot of times when you're doing business with a very big company where you're probably not going to have a person who's your point of contact. And that's maybe difficult for a company that's just starting out trying to navigate a very complex organization. So what is your advice for how you build a relationship and succeed with a company when you probably don't have access to someone who's going to answer the phone every time you have a question?
Yeah, I think you can't expect to have a personal connection. Even if you did, that person would probably turn over by the next time you needed help. So I think for me personally, it's been knowing that as you grow, like you cannot do everything yourself. I think trying to manage what you're best at and outsourcing those things that you really can't DIY. And a lot of that would be like, personal relationships or connections. There are a lot of agencies or even freelancers on Fiverr or Upwork that really specialize in working with particular situations or companies. For me, for example, I needed some help with a specific problem on our Shopify website, and I would waste like 3 days trying to fix it myself. But I know, now I can hire someone and have it fixed in an hour for $25. So I think it's hard for people, especially business owners who are very driven and motivated to learn new things, but you really have to pace yourself and understand you can't do everything, even if you could technically learn it. And then I think also just relying on networking, like for Amazon, there are groups on LinkedIn that I've also had reps reach out to me for like business development ideas, like to get you to buy ads or expand to Canada or something. And I've definitely milked that open line of communication for all it's worth, like asking politely, do you have a contact you can help me with, XYZ, or could you recommend someone who works on this other team? And oftentimes people will help you more than you would imagine they would. So if you do get that line of communication open, definitely take advantage of it.
Also, are there I assume, like, I know Amazon has programs and accelerator classes. Are there a lot of programs and classes and educational resources out there provided by these companies for businesses that want to do business with them?
There definitely are, because a lot of those companies are working with, huge clients and stuff like that, but they're not going to work on your smaller problem if it's, something that's not going to lead to a long-term partnership with that company. So they want to support you to a point where you can grow and then obviously become a client of theirs. So I think a lot of agencies and, services will provide videos or blogs about how to do basic things so that you can, work through some of those things yourself.
That's great. So, a couple of things. I guess what is just if I were leaving here today and saying, okay, Katy made me feel like I can do this and I am going to figure out how to partner with a big company to take my company to my small business to the next level. But I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. What would be your advice to me about just the very first steps I should take to start exploring that idea?
I mean, a lot of it's going to depend on what business or what product you're doing, but I think, so many people are succeeding on these platforms and there are the resources and the opportunity for you to do so. So I think really just deciding to take that plunge and then going and making that account and finding, whatever information you need. I think it's important to remember that you are this larger business or partner's customer too, even if you aren't the end consumer. And this can kind of help you reframe how you think about, working with them, or if you're intimidated with them. In a case of a company like Amazon, they want you to succeed, or Walmart. The more that they grow, the more that you grow, the more money they make. So really take advantage of any classes or resources or business development things that these companies do, because they evolve quickly and they're trying to make working with them easier. So it's probably the same for any industry or channel. You want to keep up to date on things that could affect you, and then just follow agencies that maybe work with a larger company, and also follow your competitors or any other businesses that you have seen be successful on whatever platform you work with. And then hopefully you can answer some of those basic questions and start to work through some of the issues that will be specific to your business or product.
I'm just curious, as we wrap up, you are manufacturing product, you're making these pickleball products. So have you had to apply a lot of these learnings to having a relationship with suppliers and distributors of your product?
For sure. I mean, if you think working with large organizations in the US is hard, it's a lot harder overseas. So I think you really need to obviously take advantage of any resources that are available. Keep calm, try to be really clear with your communication. Try to make sure you have all your basic ducks in a row before you go. I mean, can you do a wire transfer? Those types of things, like just setting up basic things like that, will help you on any side of business you're doing business with, and any partners or other firms you're working with. So it's definitely, there's going to be a lot that you don't know and you have to learn as you go oftentimes, I think. But it's pretty simple to just take the next right step and, research the next thing and go from there.
That's great. And that's all we have time for today. So thank you so much, Katy. It was really, really nice to have you. And thank you so much for the great advice.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anyone wants to connect or, reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'm Katy Luxem. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Katy. All right, the next part of our conversation will focus on implementing cybersecurity strategies for preparing for potential partnerships with big businesses. All right, I'm pleased to welcome Rob Simopoulos, co-founder at Defendify, a cybersecurity firm that specializes in working with small businesses. Defendify is based in Portland, Maine. Rob has more than 25 years experience in the security industry and is going to share his best advice on how to prepare your business to meet the security requirements necessary to partner with large companies. Welcome, Rob.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. So you work with small businesses every day. Tell us what their experiences are when they first attempt to partner with a larger company.
One of the things that we're seeing happening quite often is small businesses getting caught off guard in regards to the requirements that a large organization is looking for them to have in place around cybersecurity. Many don't realize that these large companies expect that their small business vendors are going to have proper cybersecurity in place, and it's actually part of their vendor selection process. To give you an example of that, we were working with a company that had sold a $1 million project to a large organization, and that large organization, said, you have the business, and they were all excited and celebrating. And next thing you know, a cybersecurity questionnaire came across to them, and they said, hey, we need to know what your cybersecurity looks like before we can start doing business with you. And this organization, this small business, was caught off guard, started to scramble and try to figure out what they're going to do in order to meet the requirements that this large company had put in place for them to continue to do business with them. So we're seeing more and more often where larger organizations are looking at small businesses and ensuring they have proper cybersecurity in place in order for them to do business with them.
So is that typical? You talked about a questionnaire. Is that a typical experience of a small business, whether they want to sell to a bigger company or just partner with them as a supplier or a provider? Is that typical?
Yeah, more and more often we're starting to see that as part of their process. I can share a little bit around that with you. If you think today about what cybersecurity is, I think in the past a lot of people thought that cybersecurity is antivirus on your computers and you're all set. But today cybersecurity really takes a layered approach. Some examples of that, for instance, if you're in your business, you're doing financial reviews and assessments and things like that, you really should be doing that around your IT systems from a cybersecurity perspective as well, doing assessments and testing. And then with your employees, you train them on safety and anti-harassment and things like that. You need to train them on cybersecurity as well. And then finally, in your business, I'm sure you have, a burglar alarm to protect you against a break-in into your business. And the same thing's expected today from a cybersecurity perspective. You need to have an alarm system and monitoring and things like that to respond to, intrusion into your systems, your IT systems. And large companies understand that. They have security professionals and security teams in place that are there to help protect their organization. And they know that when they do business with a vendor, that they're probably going to have, some vendors are going to have access to their sensitive information. They may have access to some of their sensitive systems. And they know that, one breach of those systems through that small business is going to impact that large company. So most large companies today have risk teams, and some of those risk teams are assigned to reviewing vendors and ensuring that they have proper cybersecurity in place before they do business together. And quite often, when they're doing the review of those small businesses, it's going to be in the form of a questionnaire, or perhaps they're going to ask them to log into a portal and answer questions about their cybersecurity. And one thing I can share is that we are seeing this happening more and more often as cybersecurity becomes, more and more front-facing and breaches continue to happen. Large companies are doing, reviews more and more often on their vendors.
So what can companies do, or can you, is there a way for someone to access kind of like what would be on that questionnaire? What can a company do in advance of even beginning on the journey of having some kind of partnership with a larger company?
Right. Yeah, I'm sure for some small businesses it can seem complicated, especially when I described, a layered approach. What I would recommend a small business do is hire a cybersecurity company or a cybersecurity professional to help assess their cyber posture. So, like, look at their organization, understand what they have in place, what they don't have in place, what actually needs to be protected, and then there are standardized frameworks, cybersecurity frameworks. I guess you can think of them a little bit like a questionnaire that an organization can follow to ensure that they have the proper cybersecurity controls in place that they need, first off, to protect themselves, but also so that they can protect their large customers' data and information that they may be storing, or access to their systems. I would recommend, doing an assessment as a first step, seeing what's in place, and then starting to implement the proper things to meet those standardized frameworks. Most of those large vendors are going to utilize a standardized framework like NIST or Center for Internet Security, one of those frameworks, to do an assessment on their vendors. So that might be a great place to start.
I think one of the reasons that bigger companies need to ensure that a small business has the right level of security is because there's a lot of liability there. These companies have to protect themselves and make sure that your company won't be the weak link in their cybersecurity. Can you talk a little bit more about liability? So, what kind of liability do I, as a small business owner, have if there were to be a security breach? And how does that tie into cyber insurance? I think a lot of companies don't have cyber insurance because it just seems too complicated and maybe too expensive. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. Cyber insurance is changing a lot, especially recently with some huge breaches that have occurred and the advent of continued ransomware attacks and so on. But from a liability perspective, if you in your organization have a breach and individuals or other companies are impacted by that breach, that might have you might be liable in some way, shape, or form to resolve those issues and any losses and so on that might have occurred to those individuals. There's state laws around individuals and what you need to do in the case of loss of PII, personal identifiable information, and especially if you have a breach with one of your large customers' data, you could be held liable. Organizations today definitely should have cybersecurity insurance in place, and in most cases that should be a separate policy. A lot of people will look at their general liability and say, "Hey, we have something here," but in my opinion, it should be a separate policy that covers many aspects of cyber insurance. Or incidents that might occur there. Cyber insurance seems to be changing quite a bit from what we saw before. Insurance company might review you by how much revenue do you have, how many offices, and how many employees. Today they are doing similar things to what large companies are doing when they're reviewing their vendors. They're actually providing questionnaires to the small business and saying, tell us about what cybersecurity controls, protection, technology you have in place today, before we provide you the policy. And depending on how you answer those questions, you may get a policy that's much more expensive than it would be if you have proper cybersecurity or better cybersecurity in place. But we're also seeing a lot of organizations being denied cybersecurity coverage simply because they don't have enough cybersecurity protection to protect the organization. So, in my recommendation, yes, get a cyber insurance policy in place that will help you if an incident occurs and there's possible liability involved, to help protect your organization.
That actually is really, really good advice. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see small businesses make just in general, when it comes to cybersecurity?
I would say probably the most common mistake I'm seeing right now with small businesses is non-IT leadership. So the people who are running regular business operations and not the IT side of the business. Not making cybersecurity a key part of their business operations. So maybe they're saying, hey, we have, the IT person has it handled, or Our outsourced IT people have it. I don't need to worry about it. Today as a business leader, you should really be asking a lot of questions around, what's kind of cybersecurity do we have we perform an assessment, where do we need to make improvements? There should be a standardized process in your organization to review cybersecurity and continue to improve your cybersecurity over time. The attacks are continuing to happen. People are continuing to have incidents occur there. And, if you just ignore it and not have it in place, I don't think that's the right approach. Most small businesses today should begin to start budgeting for cybersecurity and planning appropriately. Now, you can't have everything in place all at once, but you've got to start taking some action. So if you're a business leader and you're wondering, do we have the right things in place? Start those assessments and start to understand where you need to improve. Start budgeting towards it. Start putting some funds towards making those cybersecurity improvements, and make it part of your business conversation. If you have a board or advisors or people who help lead your company with you, it should be part of that conversation about cybersecurity and taking it seriously today. I think at some point in time you'll see that everybody will have a line of cybersecurity expense on their P&L, basically saying, yeah, we're investing in cybersecurity to make sure that our business is protected.
Yeah. Thank you. My last question to you is, what are if I'm feeling overwhelmed, right? I'm a small business owner, I feel completely overwhelmed by this. What are just like 3 things I could do today to make my business more secure?
All right. So I think first off, take a deep breath. I know cybersecurity seems very complicated to a lot of people because it feels really high tech. The best way I can compare it to is like protecting your building, right? So when you protect your building, you put an alarm system in place. You maybe you add cameras that as another layer of protection. Maybe you have keys that lock your doors. Maybe you have card readers into your building, things like that. Cybersecurity is the exact same concept. You're going to put layered security controls in place to protect your data and your computers and your systems. And again, step one, the first thing I would do is I would conduct that cybersecurity review. Have a cybersecurity company professional, review and sit down with you and talk to you about, what you have in place, what should probably be added, if anything needs to be improved. And then step two is, once you understand that, you're probably not going to be able to put everything all in place at once. Maybe you can, but you should start to begin to budget and plan to implement additional cybersecurity controls. So maybe you start off with that alarm system and monitoring to protect your systems and train your team. But later on, you're going to start, doing other things that you need in place for cybersecurity. So start to make that budget. Start to implement the budget, and it might take some time, but at least you're starting to make improvements in your cybersecurity. And finally, the number 3 thing I would recommend is be prepared for an incident. So you don't want to just sit back and say it's not going to happen to our organization, because it's possible that it might, and you want to be prepared. And being prepared means, understanding who and how you're going to respond to an incident. So if something does happen and you have a breach, or maybe some ransomware or something like that's happening in your organization, what are you going to do about it? And second off, I think from a preparedness perspective, that cyber insurance policy can help you as well recover financially if there is a loss from the cyber incident. So those are the 3 steps I would recommend an organization take.
That's great advice. I think it's doable and it's practical, but it's so much more than doing nothing. So thank you so much. That's all we have time for today. So I thank you so much for joining me, Rob, and I know the audience really appreciates it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye. Wow, what great advice from both speakers today. I loved this event. I think this is a fantastic topic, and there's something for everyone to learn. So thank you to Katy and Rob for joining us today, and we hope we covered this topic in a way that's really helpful to you in the audience. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Dell, FedEx, Iron Mountain, and Oracle NetSuite. Again, we really appreciate your partnership in this series. Before I let you guys go, I want to tell you about a new program at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce called the Prompt Pay Pledge. It's a program that the Chamber launched to help support quicker payment for small businesses. Now, many large organizations have already joined our effort to help these small suppliers better manage their cash flow and have access to their capital more quickly. We want to invite you to learn more about that pledge and see how you can get involved. You can visit the uschamber.com, or you can click on the link on the right-hand side of your screen right now. Before I go, I'd like to invite you to join us next week on Tuesday, June 27th, for a co-brand studio, which is focusing on small businesses and their opportunity to take advantage of the employee retention tax credit. You will receive an invite to that in the email that you get after this event. So that's it. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.